1, 2.
So, our last piece of equipment or theory that we want to look at before we dig into the ventilator itself is our little lung simulator. So like we said, unfortunately, a patient doesn't come with all these adjustments and toys that we can play with so that we know exactly what their raw is or exactly what their compliance is. But on the simulator, we have that power, godlike power. So let's look at first our airways resistance. So remember, airways resistance looks at how big or small, right, our airways are. So here you can see is set up as 5. It says resistance is 5. So that means that we are simulating an endotracheal tube because as soon as we intubate any patient, even though their normal compliance is 0.5 to 1.5, as soon as we intubate them, they're all going to be at least 5 of airways resistance. So this is just normal. We intubate them, that's what we expect. But what if we have someone with lots of secretions, with inflammation, say a burn patient from smoke inhalation, or bronchospasm, asthma would have all 3 of those, then raw goes up. Well, we have a handy dandy little blue container for each of our lung simulators that has a number of different airways resistances. So I took out 4 just so we can show you how these work. The resistance with 5 is already there. Here is a 20. Notice resistance is set at 20. This one is 50. And lastly, if you want a huge amount of raw, 500. So these are super simple to change. All you have to do is come over here to where the raw fits into the circuit. And it'll take me a moment to move it, but okay. So we're taking out our 5 and going to put in, well, I happen to have 500 here, so let's go. We're going to go from normal to a huge amount of resistance. And just out of interest, look, this is 5. You can see a huge opening there compared to 500. You can see there is hardly any place for air to get through. So when we put this into the circuit, that is going to simulate severe airway obstruction. And the pressures, if we're in volume ventilation, are going to go extremely high. And if we're in pressure ventilation, we're going to hardly get any volume. So we're going to put this in the circuit. And now, all that remains is for us to connect. If we were ventilating the patient, we connect the breathing circuit right there. Okay, so now our raw is in line with our breathing circuit, and we ventilate this lung through this airway, just like a real patient. Okay. Now, last thing we want to look at is, because the ventilator's not working, or not turned on yet, I'm just going to disconnect that. The last thing we want to look at is how we adjust compliance. So if you look on the top here, you can see in liters per centimeter of water pressure, we go from 0.15, which is extremely non-compliant, extremely compliant, 150 mils per centimeter water pressure, all the way to 0.01, which is only 10 mils per centimeter water pressure. So this is very non-compliant, at this end very compliant. Well, how do we adjust it? So if we look on the side here is a spring. So if we come way back here to the very compliant, make sure it's straight up and down. You can see I now have it set at 0.15, so this is very compliant. Notice when the lung moves, it's going to come up from this end here, and you can see there's no spring resistance way down here. It's at this end, makes it very easy to expand the lung. So if we're in volume ventilation, our pressures will be very low when we have the spring adjusted back to this side. Well, what if we make it down here? Now look at how fat that spring is. If we put this spring way down here at the end and then try and lift up that end of the lung simulator, it is going to be very difficult to stretch this tightly coiled spring. So that simulates very low compliance, where we only get 10 mils per centimeter water pressure compared to down here where we get 150 mils per centimeter water pressure. Now the last thing is when we change compliance, we also change this little setting down here. So if we were going to be at 0.15 of a liter, then we set the selector that shows how much volume we get way over here. Where if we are very non-compliant, we swing this all the way down to 0.01 and now take our volume readings off of that end. And that is our lung simulator.